Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Clearly Ambiguous. I hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for likes, shares, comments on the previous video. Do apologize for being irregular and not uploading videos in recent times. However, we are back now on what are we discussing today. Well, today we are going to discuss about a couple of fighter aircrafts and namely the Rafales. Let's begin with the Rafales and why there is so much interest in the Rafales, especially the Rafales with the Indian Air Force. Now, it seems like there are some people who would believe anything that anybody would like to say about the Indian Rafales except what Indians would like to say about it. Well, it's completely their choice and we can't force them to anything. Everybody can have opinions. Similarly, I have mine. Anyways, so the things that have recently been said, that is Indian Rafales going down. Now, eventually, French have made an announcement, which has not been confirmed by the Indian side anyways, which is an Indian Rafale going down. Now, what is very interesting is that when this has actually happened, it has not happened in a combat situation. So it is basically, even if it's gone down, it is not a win as the people on our side and people on the other side of the border would like to claim, right? If it has gone down and it has gone down under non-combative circumstances, well, how can it be a win for anyone anyways? Secondly, there is a lot of interest in the Rafales, and recently there has been news where the Chinese have been caught snooping on the Greek Rafales. And the reason for this interest might be that although Chinese JF-10s, JF-17s or whatever they are called seem to be, really hyped up on paper, but eventually they do not have any combat experience and have never proven themselves in combat. But Chinese would like to claim, right? Chinese like to make a lot of claims, and there are certain people who would like to believe the Chinese claim. That's okay, completely okay. If you see most of the reports that are there, when it comes down to speaking against the Rafale, they are, if you look at the websites and where those news and reports and articles are originating, they essentially seem to be all originating from one place, and that is China. The Americans, although would love to say a lot about and against the Rafales, but they essentially would hold themselves back because French essentially are a NATO ally in the end, right? And Americans would not like to go up in arms against an ally, right? At this point of time, while the Americans are wanting certain concessions in the NATO because the Americans want everybody to spend, they cannot basically end up saying that, the French technology is all bad. So you're not hearing a lot of Americans talk against the Rafales. It's essentially the Pakistanis and essentially the Chinese. Now, let's for a minute take a moment to understand what has happened. See, I've said this before and I'm saying it again, that when there is an engagement, right, what it essentially is a proving ground for the weapons and the weapon systems. Now, if you look at Rafales, they have basically proven themselves in most of the theaters that they've been used in, right, and they have a pretty good track record. Unlike the Chinese, all the jets that are made in China have never basically faced combat, or probably the first ever glimpse of combat that they saw was Operation Sindoor, right? And even in that, they have basically not ended up achieving anything, although the Chinese would like to claim otherwise. But then again, what have they shot down and where have they shot down and what damage they have caused? There are no reports from the Indian side when it comes to what targets the Chinese JF-17s and JF-10s were doing. Anyways, but the Chinese seem to be very interested in the Rafales. Another thing is that if you look at, for a minute, you focus on the American side of things, right? In recent times, there have been reports where there was a joint exercise between the American and the French, and apparently Rafale was able to not only lock on to an F-22, it was able to hold a consistent missile lock, which the Americans downplayed and would like to deny, but the French ended up sharing the footage of it as well. What it essentially means that in certain scenarios, Rafale might even end up performing the F-22. The Americans don't like this. See, Americans never like when, their technology, they just don't like it. Unlike the Russians. See, we will come to the Russians as well, because All this talk about the Rafales, although this talk about the JF-17s, JF-10s, and the F-35, so on and so forth, nobody is essentially speaking about the good old boy, the Sukhoi 30. Now, why I raise that right now is that a lot of people ended up saying, you know what, the Indians are not even getting the source code from the French. Fine, okay, so let's understand that, okay, the French did not share the source code of the Rafales. But then again, it is already now believed that Indians extensively ended up using the BrahMos. Now, if that BrahMos system was used, and it was used so successfully, which has been shown in the proofs of the devastation that they ended up causing on the other side of the border in Operation Sindoor, then where were those BrahMoses launched from? Of course, from probably platforms at sea, platforms on land, and of course, there has been evidence that they were launched from air to surface. Now, if they were launched from air to surface, which system was basically used? It couldn't be the Rafale, because everybody likes to say that we were not provided with the source code, so we could not have mounted the BrahMoses on the Rafales. So if we had not mounted the BrahMoses on the Rafales, and we essentially ended up using just BrahMoses, then probably did we even use Rafales? Right? So if we didn't use them, how were they shot down? See, you can make a point there. Anyways, another thing is that if they were launched from air to surface, so obviously the Sukhoi was used. So after all being all said and done, nobody seems to be interested in dissing. Of course, the Chinese would not like to say anything against the Sukhois because the Russians are good friends of the Chinese. Chinese would like to say everything against the Rafales. The Americans at this point of time have no idea what to do because, there is another thing of interest here is the Pakistani F-16s. Now, very interesting thing about the F-16s there is, they seem to have not been in air. Yes, yet they have caused damage. They are not on the air bases. And they were not in the hangars that were devastated as well. So where were they? They keep flying virtually in space, is it? So there's a lot of things. And there are a lot of claims that are made. But if you look at all those claims and you evaluate them logically right now, it seems like the Rafale as a platform has performed. Sukhoi as a platform has performed. S-400s have been able to perform because then again, the Indian air defenses were not overwhelmed. Everything and anything that was sent in the form of drones, missiles, and whatnot was not able to achieve any target hits on our side of the international border. So, and there is evidence, right, to prove that. So if the other side, if the Chinese would like to claim anything, if the Americans would like to claim anything. And while all this is happening, the Indians were conducting exercises with the Royal Navy, the British Royal Navy, and it seems like the very illustrious Fat Amy, aka F-35, made an emergency landing in Kerala. And the Kerala tourism has having a great time trolling the said aircraft. And you can check that out. Just look for, just type F-35 in Google and along with Kerala, and you'll end up seeing what a joke this aircraft has become. Donald Trump would like to try all his strong arm tactics to basically sell India this aircraft. And would we want to buy an aircraft, a piece of defense equipment, which essentially fails even in peacetime war game exercises, and at the same point of time has to be grounded for extended periods of time to perform repairs? See, when you have something like this, and if it goes down like this, you are supposed to repair it as soon as possible and get it into the air, right? So every day that F-35 stays in Kerala, it basically is not making any points on the fact that it is a great fighting platform. One, it is grounded. Two, it's blown its cover basically because if it's landed in a civilian aircraft, of course, there was a radar signature that has been associated with it on the civilian radar. And at the same point of time, probably a scanning Air Force radar as well. So probably we already have that signature on file, and stealth cover for the F-35 might be blown now. So probably the Americans need to think about scrapping the entire program instead of trying to sell it to the Indians. The Indians, of course, at this point of time should go back to what they were doing essentially, is either trying to make it yourself or buy Russian. Because Russian equipment seems to be more dependable and performs much better. And the proof of that is that the Western NATO allies, or the NATO countries, and the Americans, and Americans are also part of NATO, isn't it? They've thrown everything at the Russians in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, and essentially that's all President Zelensky ever does, is basically just goes out there with a bowl and gets some more money to fight, continue the fight. And he talks about peace. He needs ceasefire. If you need ceasefire, just agree to a ceasefire. You just don't want to. Because I think his relevance will be completely lost the moment there is a ceasefire. So it is in his best interest that he has to force all the Ukrainians and Russians into war right now. Anyway, so the Western allies have possibly thrown everything at the Russians, and Russians seem to have an answer to that. And they still keep advancing. So, you know what, no matter what the Western media would like you to believe, yes, Russians are facing losses, as well as we have said as well, that if there is a conflict, there would be losses. Whatever those losses are, we would like to make public, we would not like to make public, and it's completely the choice of our government and our Air Force. Nobody can force our hand into that, right? But the fact of the matter right now is that all said and done, whatever anybody would like to claim, the Rafale is still a pretty good platform, does not fail in its hydraulics and land in countries just like that on civilian air bases. It has performed earlier as well in airstrikes, and it has performed again in Operation Sindoor as well. Even something which we probably have started saying is an aging platform such as Sukhoi is still performing, and it has performed every time it has been called upon. So yeah, we should probably be looking at more weapons to be acquired from the Russian side of things, right? As far as the Chinese are concerned, of course, they did not end up selling their defense technology to us. That would be really stretching it. But it seems like that is probably the reason why now Chinese would like to ramp up and prove some amount of defense superiority in the form of going against that same old thing that they do against Taiwan. Now, let's talk about the F-35s for a bit longer. And there was another thing that probably was brought into, if to be believed as rumors, like everybody would like to believe the Rafales were shot down. Well, the Iranians seem to have claimed that MiG-29, which most countries now consider pretty obsolete, and we also have a lot of MiG-29, seems to have been so capable that it's actually ended up shooting down an F-35. Now, originally the reports were that it was probably Israeli F-35. Then there are certain people who are saying that probably it was one of those F-35s that was escorting those B-2 bombers, and probably one of those has been shot. I would like to understand, when President Trump ended up saying that they have complete air superiority over Iran, what did they actually mean? See, first and foremost, the Americans did not have any gumption to attack Iran till the time Israelis had pounded Iran for a while. The Americans like to display their air superiority over countries who probably do not even have air forces, though, which have a credible deterrence, right? They'd like to claim a lot of things, but then again, it's the same thing that the Americans have been claiming, right? They probably made the best assault rifle in the form of F-16, and everybody saw it failed miserably in Vietnam, and the Russian AKs have been performing marvelously, and even the American soldiers bear testament to the fact that the AKs actually perform better on ground. So that is testament to the fact that the Russian equipment does perform, right? Chinese equipment might start performing in future, but the one thing that is for sure is out of all this ambiguity of what is performing, what is not performing, it does seem that a lot of American equipment is failing, and is failing miserably. So no matter what Americans like to say right now, and who would like to believe what propaganda right now, if you just apply a little bit of logic, right? Because I know there are people there. I was talking to somebody, he would believe anything but the fact that the Indian Air Force performed really well in Operation Sindoor, or the Indian have been able to not only achieve air superiority over Pakistan, but at the same point of time cause considerable amount of damage, which will take the other side a little while. But that's the reason why probably Pakistanis are being given loans to, so that those loans can go to, repairing those houses which were demolished. And probably that's the reason why they've even got a service about $435 million, it seems, to just service their F-16s. Yeah, why would they need to do anything with those F-16s if their F-16s were in good condition? It seems like there's something that is... So the point is that everybody who's asking questions here can at the same point of time ask questions to the other side as well. Where is the proof that they achieved any of their targets on this side except for PowerPoint presentations? And at the same point of time, could they probably show some proof when they say that they have downed this aircraft and that aircraft? So if you were to believe them, they are probably downed about 50 Rafales, and Indians only purchased about 36 of them. So how did you down 50? It seems like they play a lot of DCS, which is Digital Combat Simulator. And in that, because that's the footage they have shown, right, when it comes to dogfights. Anyways, so that is the clarity and ambiguity that is happening out there, and that is what I wanted to talk about. Please mention in comment section your views about the things that people say, right? And that's it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thanks for watching. Keep watching. Until next time, you take care. Bye-bye. Bye for now.